Here are the assembly instructions for my 4.7-inch naval gun cannon toy. First, we've got the 7 3D printed parts. That's the carriage, the barrel, 2 wheels, 2 wheel caps, and the hammer. Next, we have the metal parts, 2 2mm by 20mm locator pins, a brass-collared screw, an appropriate nut, and the spring. For tools, you'll want 1 or 2 1/16" punches, and a number 6 by 32 threads per inch tap. You don't need the tap, but it makes for a smoother operating screw. We're going to tap the elevation screw housing hole here. It's a little easier to do than the alternative, which is making the threads with the brass screw, threading it into the plastic, maintaining enough downward pressure on it at the start so it doesn't strip the first few threads in the plastic. Every screw is self-tapping in soft enough material. If you're doing that, you might also need a pair of pliers to help turn the screw the first time. Once you've cut the threads, it should be cleaner. Of course, the tap is $6, and I've got the McMaster-Carr part number for it in the description, along with that for a bunch of the other parts. So, with the hole tapped, I like to give it a test with the screw that it's going to host. Clean out any debris in the tapped hole. And it looks good. Next, we're going to install the spring. I like to put a little bend in the back of mine so it fits more cleanly in the pocket at the back of the carriage. It's not necessary, but you can do it if you want. To bend it, I clamp it in my bench vise and kind of pull it toward me a little bit. You don't need very much. Take the unbent end of the spring and slide it under the hammer braces at the front of the carriage. Then press down on the other end and slide the whole spring back into the pocket at the back of the carriage. It should be in there pretty well. You can see here as I show you. Next up, we're going to install the hammer. Take one of the locator pins, a punch, and the hammer. So we're going to use the punch to line everything up. Put the hammer in place, then run the punch through the carriage and the hammer. Then use the locator pin to push the punch out. This helps you keep everything aligned while the pin is going in. So the carriage is 22mm wide and the pins are only 20mm, so I like to push them in a bit so they're centered. You can also buy 2mm by 22mm pins from McMaster-Carr. The part number for that's in the description too. Next, we'll cock the hammer to keep it out of the way and install the elevation screw. Take the nut and put it in the housing. Then thread the screw in. I like to thread it all the way through the housing on the carriage to clean out any debris left in the thread from tapping. Once that's done, here you can see I've got it almost all the way through now. There it is poking out, so we're going to back it out now to the point where the base of the collar on the screw is a little bit above the top of the trunnion mount on the carriage. To install the barrel, we're going to slide it in from the front. This nub on the barrel engages the collar of the elevation screw, which is what lets the screw move the barrel up and down. When we slide the barrel in, we want the nut to be in the collar. The nub to be in the collar, rather. There you go, nub in the collar. Now we'll add the barrel pin. Again, take a punch and use it to line up all the holes. There is a way from which this is easier, a side from which this is easier. I do not recall which one it is offhand, so I'm going to try it from the right first. And then, again, try and use the locator pin to push the punch out of the hole. It is getting bound up on the barrel, and I think it is actually, if you go in from the left with the punch, it's easier with the pin from the right, because the elevation screw is helping hold the barrel in place on the right side. And that looks like it's through. So I'll center it real quick. And then test to make sure the elevation screw works correctly. It should thread easily, and screwing it in deeper should raise the barrel relative to the carriage. The firing mechanism is now fully assembled, so we're going to drop the hammer, and add the wheels. So if you have the most recent version of the files, you'll have 2 notches in the axle, which I'm showing you here, and 2 little lugs in the axle cap. These work together to lock the wheels onto the axle. You put the cap on through the center of the wheel and twist it so that the axle cap locks the wheel between the cap and the axle. It is easier to assemble the cap and the wheel, pushing the cap through the hub in the wheel, and then press them on as a unit. Line up the lugs with the grooves and give it a little turn when you're done. The version of the carriage I put on Thingiverse has the notches on the sides of the axle instead of the top and bottom as pictured here. This makes them print more cleanly since they aren't touching the supports. Oops, it looks like I knocked the wheel slightly off. So even with the version on Thingiverse, however, you may have to file down the support interface on the bottom of the axle a little bit so that the axle cap fits and turns easily by hand. And that's that, a fully assembled 4.7-inch naval gun cannon toy. Give it one more little function test. Now these will easily shoot a little plastic dart, a solid 20 to 25 feet across a room. My chronograph measures it at 30 feet per second, so don't point it at your eyes, and be careful with the spring, it's under a fair bit of tension. What to do with it? Well, I might recommend a rousing game of Little Wars. There's a link to my website here, where I write about the first battle I played, and a picture you can see on screen. It is great fun, and if you've got a 3D printer and you can make this cannon, you can definitely make the toy soldiers you'll need too. So, well, have fun. Thanks for watching.